Wright on Shardless Sultai, who is 8-0-1, currently 25th on our on our leaderboard, and Joe Lossett is currently 3rd on our leaderboard, who is 9-0 with Miracles. So let's take a look.
Strap yourselves in, ladies and gentlemen. This one's going to be a long one.
So Joe's going to start off. He's going to fall to 19 using a Scalding Tarn. He's going to fetch out likely a basic land to not get wastelanded, and then play a Sensei's Divining Top. Robert's going to fire back using his Misty Rainforest, also falling to 19. And we're looking at probably a Deathrite Shaman or something like... it doesn't look like he has Thoughtseize in his main deck, so it's likely just a Deathrite Shaman here.
Yeah, for the opening turns, these players probably aren't going to do too much. They're going to be jockeying for position, just sort of getting their stuff online. With Robert, it may be an Ancestral Visions or Deathrite Shaman, so they can develop his mana or some card advantage, while Joe's going to be looking to get his top, maybe counterbalance. And an early counterbalance can be quite annoying. We'll have to see if Robert has something like an Abrupt Decay to deal with it.
So Joe is going to play that counterbalance. Robert will let it resolve. He's going to respond with an Abrupt Decay. I think Joe has decided if he wants to look at the top card of his deck or not. And he does, so there is a Snapcaster Mage here, and that might determine if he wants to activate his top in his upkeep or not. Robert's going to exile the Scalding Tarn from Joe's graveyard with that Deathrite Shaman and cast a second copy. Pass the turn back to Joe. Looks like he's just going to draw that Snapcaster Mage. And he has another counterbalance.
Back-to-back counterbalances seem like it could be a little tricky for the Shardless Sultai deck to beat. It's not unlikely that he has one Abrupt Decay. He does play 4 in his deck. But for him to have another right now is not the most statistically probable thing.
It also looks like Joe has a third counterbalance in his hand. So even if Robert is able to either find another copy of Abrupt Decay, either via drawing it or cascading into it off of a Shardless Agent, Joe just has the third one to reload with.
Yeah, another thing that we didn't really mention in the pregame talk was that Vendilion Clique and Venser Shaper Savant give Joe access to more 3 and 4 mana spells in order to counter cards like Shardless Agent, Liliana the Veil, Jace the Mind Sculptor that the most Miracles decks don't actually have access to.
Alright, so Robert is going to cast a Shardless Agent. Cascade is on the stack. So is the counterbalance trigger. They're figuring out what happens first, basically.
Yeah, so the way this works is that the Shardless Agent gets cast, the Cascade goes on the stack, and the Cascade resolves first. That's a lot of lands. I'm sure that Robert is happy that he's not drawing all those, but just getting a Deathrite Shaman isn't the most exciting thing.
So now we have the Deathrite Shaman on the stack.
This is a lot of pressure, though. Joe probably needs to find a sweeper at this point. He does have 4 Terminus in his deck. He does not have any main deck Supreme Verdicts, but he's going to have to answer this board.
And it looks like there might be a Terminus in those top 3. He might even just reveal it here to Robert so that he can see what's coming on his upkeep.
And the Shardless Sultai deck is a little faster because of Shardless Agent and Deathrite Shaman being a boost to its mana and the number of permanents that it can play. But it's not going to run out of gas like a lot of other aggro decks that we've seen do.
All right, so Joe is going to reveal a Spell Snare to counter the Deathrite Shaman with counterbalance. Shardless Agent is going to resolve. Robert will use his other Deathrite Shaman to suspend an Ancestral Visions, play a Wasteland, and pass the turn back to Joe.
And what Robert's doing is typically a good way to fight combo decks, or excuse me, control decks, is he has a combination of creature and non-creature threats. In this case, the non-creature threat is Ancestral Visions, which is on suspend.
Joe is going to rearrange the top 3 cards of his library in his upkeep. Going to draw an Arid Mesa and play a second copy of Sensei's Divining Top. Now keep in mind, it looked like there is a Terminus on top of his deck, so if he needs to pop it on Robert's turn, he is able to cash in one of those tops, put the Miracle trigger for the Terminus on the stack, and then fetch away his Arid Mesa and get a white source to play it.
Yeah, at this stage, while Robert does have a lot of creatures, they're not dealing a whole lot of damage, and Joe has a pretty high lick total, so he could even wait an extra turn to Terminus if he wants to try to bait out a little bit more.
Get a little more value.
Yeah, I could also see him just using the Terminus inside of Robert's combat step.
Well, here's a Liliana of the Veil for Robert.
And a lot of times Liliana is a very good threat against control decks, particularly Miracles, because they usually don't have a lot of good ways to deal with it. Sometimes you'll see cards like Council's Judgment to deal with problematic permanents like this. With Joe's list, the way that he's mainly going to fight Liliana of the Veil is either by countering it or attacking it with some of his flash threats like Snapcaster Mage, Vendilion Click, Venser Shaper Savant.
This could potentially be a very good Liliana here, as Joe does only have 2 cards left in his hand. Granted, he can still play off the top 3 cards of his deck with Divining Top.
Yeah, since his Divining Top does play nicely against Liliana, ensuring that you don't have the cards that you really want to keep taken out of your hand, because you can keep them floating on top of your library.
Yeah, so with Liliana on the stack, Joe is going to draw a card with his Sensei's Divining Top. He's going to Miracle his Terminus, fetching his Arid Mesa for a Plains. And now, still with the counterbalance trigger on the stack, he is going to be able to use his top to find a 3 to potentially counter that Liliana. Robert is going to exile the Arid Mesa and eat an instant or sorcery with that Deathrite Shaman to get a little extra damage in on Joe, dropping him down to 15.
And Joe's sequencing on this is great. He's answered the board, he's gotten a shuffle effect, and activated his top to give him some extra looks to try to find a 3-mana spell to counter this Liliana. Unfortunately, he didn't find it, but he gave himself every opportunity to do so.
The Liliana is going to resolve, and plus to 4. Joe is going to pitch Counterbalance. Robert's going to pitch a Tarmogoyf. Not a bad idea, considering that he knows Joe has Spell Snare from an earlier Counterbalance trigger.
Yep.
Joe's just going to activate top here in his main phase.
And it will be a long slog. Joe can battle back from this, but with this particular board state, it does look kind of nice for Robert Wright. This Liliana is going to eat away at Joe's hand and generate a lot of card advantage for Robert Wright. And the Ancestral Visions is also going to generate a lot of card advantage for Robert Wright.
And so Visions is going to tick down to 2. Robert's going to draw a card for his turn. Looks like Liliana is going to go up to 5. Robert's going to discard a Brainstorm. Joe discards a land, and Robert's just going to pass the turn back. Joe's going to draw a card with top on his end step. Ooh, and here we have a Vendilion Click.
And this is a great way to fight that Liliana, like I was saying.
It will resolve. The ability is going to target Robert. He will reveal Shardless Agent, which he could have cast last turn.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that he didn't. I guess he was just worried about it getting countered by Counterbalance. I was hoping he could find a spot where Joe is tapped down a little more.
All right, Joe is going to redraw his top and play it. He's going to look at the top 3.
This is also great timing for the Vendilion Click. If that Liliana had had an opportunity to go up to 6 loyalty, Joe could have potentially been in a situation where he could attack with his Vendilion Click, knocking the Liliana down to only 3, but then the Liliana would be able to -2, killing the Vendilion Click and not dying. Whereas here, if Robert wants to deal with his Vendilion Click, he may have to lose his Liliana.
And one thing to note here is it's real important. In the top 3, Joe is just kind of floating a Terminus and a land. And that land is going to be able to counter the Ancestral Visions when it comes off of Suspend.
Yep.
Here we have Shardless Agent. We're going to have a Cascade trigger, Counterbalance trigger. Let's see what Robert can find. It is a Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf will be countered by the Counterbalance trigger, revealing another Counterbalance.
Joe's got all 4. It's a little interesting that Robert Wright may only need, 2 Abrupt Decays to lock Joe out of counterbalances.
Robert's going to minus his Liliana to try and get rid of Joe's Vendilion Click.
And Joe does have the option to cast Entreat to keep the Vendilion Click in his deck while also answering the Shardless. agent, but...
I think that Entreat is white, white X on the
Oh,
Miracle.
excuse me, I was thinking Terminus.
Yes, he could Terminus.
Yeah.
The Liliana Edict is going to resolve. Meridian Click is going to hit the bin for Joe. He's going to look at the top 3 on Robert's end step.
And it would be interesting to consider casting that Terminus right then and there if you know you're going to be casting it against the Shardless deck or Shardless agent, because then at least you still have that Vendilion Click in your deck. And with these games going so long and having so many of your resources end up in your graveyard, there may be some corner case scenarios where you actually just don't have enough stuff left in your deck.
Yeah. Well, Joe is going to Terminus on his draw step, pass the turn back to Robert. His Ancestral Visions will come off of Suspend, and a Flooded Strand on top of Joe's deck is going to counter it. Robert will just draw for his turn and pass.
And that is certainly crisis averted. So Robert had a lot of stuff before, and he was looking to put himself in a pretty good position, but Joe has been able to navigate this game perfectly so that he's countered and dealt with all the problematic permanents that he needed to. And now they're basically in a top deck war, except Joe has this huge advantage of counterbalance Sensei's Divining Top. So while it's going to take a long time for Joe to actually start winning this game, he's certainly turned the corner and gotten himself into a very good position.
Well, Joe is just going to look at the top 3 on Robert's end step, draw for his turn, and pass back. Robert is just playing another land and passing. He has a bunch of wastelands, but Joe's deck has a million basics, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, a really great top deck for Robert to get back into this game would be a card like Jace the Mind Sculptor. It can be pretty tricky for counterbalance to counter. Oh, and he actually does have one. I'm surprised that he didn't try to cast it.
He does only have 1 blue mana available.
Oh, there we go.
So he's not able to play it. Joe is going to cast a Vendilion Click. Now, do you leave the Jace since he can't play it?
If Joe doesn't have a answer for it, I think I would bottom it. So the Vendilion Click, though, is a good answer to it, though. So
yeah, so he is just going to leave the Jace. Joe will fall to 14 using his Flooded Strand to go find another basic island.
Again, a resolved Jace is usually hard for a lot of Miracles decks to deal with, but Joe has these flash threats that are quite good against cards like Jace.
He's going to check the top 3 on Robert's end step, and it looks like there is an Entreat the Angels. So.
And we may actually see this game come to an end quite quickly.
Joe's not going to Entreat.
I was ready for an extremely long game, but looks like not yet.
It might just be that he's planning on casting Entreat on Robert's end step.
Yeah, I think so.
Or he's just going to do it now. Counterbalance will counter the Brainstorm. He'll be able to Entreat for 4 Angels. And
Robert has seen enough.
Robert is going to scoop it up. Game 1 is going to go to Joe Lossett on his unique build of Miracles. He continually does well with it. Let's take a look at the player sideboards to see if we can figure out what they're going to be doing. On Robert's side, we have 2 copies of Disfigure, 2 copies of Golgari Charm, 2 Nihil Spellbomb, 2 copies of Thoughtseize, a Baleful Strix, a Dismember, a Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Hymn to Turak, 1 Null Rod, 1 Sylvan Library, and 1 Vendilion Click. How do you think Robert's going to sideboard?
So I like his discard and his card advantage effects. So Sylvan Library, Hymn to Torak, Thoughtseize, I think those are all going to be good things to bring in. Golgari Charm has some good usefulness in that it can kill Vendilion Clicks as well as counterbalances. And the other card that I think is going to be quite good is Null Rod, as a way to make it so that Sensei's Divining Top just doesn't do what it needs to do.
Yeah, just having a way to fight those Divining Top, especially if you're a deck that has a lot of hand disruption,
Absolutely.
is going to be important. Now on Joe's side, we have 1 Swords to Plowshares, 2 copies of Moat, 2 Wear Tear, 1 Pyroblast, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Back to Basics, and 3 copies of Flusterstorm. How do you think Joe is going to sideboard?
So Joe has a lot of different options here. He could bring in Wear Tear as a way to fight a potential Sylvan Library. That's something that you see in these decks a lot. He could also bring in a card like Rest in Peace. It's very, very good against cards like Tarmogoyf and Deathrite Shaman. We could also see, an extra Swords to Plowshares just to have some extra target removal. Moat could be quite effective in this matchup. The Shardless deck doesn't have very many flyers, generally speaking. So he's got a lot of different options here. How exactly he wants to do it, though, is a little interesting. So I think all of those cards are options that are on the table. but I could see some of them not coming in.
Are we going to see a back to basics, you think?
Probably. That would be good.
He got me real good in one of the games we played before. Now
they don't make them like they used to.
They don't. And so back to basics, for those of you who aren't aware, it's 2 and a blue, it's an enchantment, and it makes it so that non-basic lands don't untap during their controller's untap
Quite
step.
the hoser.
Non-basic lands are all over the Legacy format. And if you need to get some yourself, well, I got news for you. There's currently a sale going on at StarCityGames.com on select non-basic lands.
Oh, wow, nice.
The sale is going until Monday at 10:59 a.m., so make sure you get yours now. If you're looking for shock lands, fetch lands, wastelands, expedition lands, basically any type of non-basic land, there's a good chance we have a good deal for them on sale at StarCityGames.com. Check that out. It's a weekly sale. What time does it end?
10:59 Monday.
a.m. on Monday. Make sure you guys check that out. We can go ahead and pop back here as our players are finishing up their shuffling and sideboarding. Let's look at Joe Lossett's player slide really quick, see if we can learn a little more information about him while they look at their opening hands. He's 36 on Team Nerd Rage Gaming. He lives in Redlands, California. 20 open top 8s.
Ooh, that's a lot.
It is. He has 5 wins, 2 invitational top 8s. He follows StarCraft 2 as close as he follows Magic. He was a varsity rower for the University of Colorado, and he is a Star Wars fanatic. I wonder if he's on the Han Shot first camp or not.
Not sure, but I do know one thing, and that's me and him should stream some StarCraft at some point. That would be fun.
I mean, I don't know. I kind of want to see. Are you any good at StarCraft?
Yeah, I'm pretty good.
Also, I'm hearing that Joe Lossett hasn't lost a game since round 1.
The legacy specialist. What an axe murderer.
Yeah, so he had 2 buys, lost a game in round 3, and then
it was like, yep, I'm done with that. That wasn't very fun.
And then went 14-0 after that first game.
Yeah, that's pretty unreal.
Wow.
That is the type of stuff that legends are made of.
Yes. Yes, it is. Man, seeing that 20 top 8s makes me real excited to start battling again. I only have 19, so I got to try and keep up with Joe.
Yeah, you got to pass him. He's our rival. Everyone on another team is our rival. I only have 8 open top 8s. I'm looking to climb 2.
All right, so players are just going to start off with land go on the first turn. On Joe's end step, though, Robert's going to crack his Verdant Catacombs, fall to 19, and cast a Brainstorm off an Underground Sea. He's going to untap, draw a card for the turn. He's going to use another Verdant Catacombs, flying to 18 to get a copy of Bayou, and I smell a Hymn to Turak.
Yeah, Hymn to Turak is a great way to deal with a lot of Joe's permanents. His cards are so good when they resolve, so you got to get them before they do resolve.
Well, Joe's going to fall to 19 and use a copy of Flooded Strand here. He's going to find a
Could
basic
this be a
island.
Spell Snare?
Let's see if we got a
Snare would be perfect.
Maybe,
it could also
maybe a Spell Pierce, maybe a Brainstorm.
Yeah, it could also be a Brainstorm to maybe hide some important cards on top of his library. So he does have the Spell Snare.
Does have one of his 2 copies of Spell Snare. Let's see if Robert's going to hymn himself by using a Force of Will to make his hymn resolve. He's thinking about it.
It's probably worth it. This Hymn to Turak has potential to be a 2-for-1, so allowing Joe to 1-for-1 it is just not why Hymn to Turak's in the deck.
All right, so Robert is going to fall to 17 with the Force of Will. All right, and so we're going to get a Swords to Plowshares and a Moat.
Moat did come in.
Out of Joe's hand.
Now, this is great because how would Robert deal with Moat? He's got a Maelstrom Pulse. Maybe he has the 2 Golgari Charms, but that's it.
Yeah.
Moat would be an extremely difficult card for Robert to beat. He would have to Ultimate Liliana or something else ridiculous like that.
Well, Joe is going to play Divining Top on turn 2, but not have another. Well, he does have a land. Robert is going to Thoughtseize Joe, but he's going to Brainstorm in response.
Looks like Joe also brought in the Red Elemental Blasts. So for all of you who want to play like Joe, what you need to do is you need to just sit here and write down every single sideboard card you see so that you can sideboard just like Joe. It's a little interesting having Red Elemental Blast in against this Shardless deck. It's a lot like Wear and Tear, where Robert has certain cards that are must answers, like Jace the Mind Sculptor, for example. But you can kind of get caught with your pants down if Robert's draw ends up being a lot of Tarmogoyfs and Abrupt Decays and discard spells and Deathrite Shamans.
And so Robert's going to take the red elemental blast out of Joe's hand, falling down to 15 off of his own Thoughtseize. On Joe's end step, Robert is going to brainstorm. Pick up a couple more lands. Let's see what he puts back.
Just to break down Joe's sideboarding a little bit more, we can see that he's not only brought in the red elemental blast, but the moat that I mentioned before, and those two kind of go as a nice plan. If he gets a moat in play, basically all he needs to worry about after that is the blue cards for the most part. So having that red elemental blast with the moat makes a lot of sense.
All right, well, Robert's going to crack a fetch land on Joe's end step. Joe's going to respond with Vending Click. He's going to target Robert. It looks like he has a New Art Vending Click and a Maelstrom Pulse in his hand. Let's see if Joe gets rid of the... He's going to get rid of the Vending Click. Okay, so Robert does have to draw a card off the Vending Click. He's going to finish searching for his fetch.
That was a little weird on the sequencing there, but basically what happened was just that. Robert cracked a fetch land. Joe took the opportunity to cast his Vending Click, and then...
Yeah, we have to resolve the Vending Click before you get to search out a land from your deck.
Yeah.
We've got a Maelstrom Pulse on the Vending Click.
Joe's like, you wanna target my top?
It is a legal target. You have the option.
Oh, Joe, you trickster, you.
Joe is going to top on his upkeep. He's going to draw a land for the turn and pass back to Robert. Robert's going to suspend an Ancestral Visions.
And that is a good top deck. It's going to take a little while for that thing to kick off, and Joe's going to have some time to potentially find an answer for it, but Ancestral Visions in a top deck war can really swing things for the player that casts it.
So Joe is thinking on Robert's end step. Going to draw a card with Divining Top. Going to Snapcaster a Brainstorm here on Robert's end step. So this will dig him a little bit deeper in his deck, but more importantly, it's going to put a threat on the board. Robert is down to 14, so if Joe's able to continue to force Robert to fight against what he can potentially do, that Snapcaster can chip away at Robert's life total.
Yeah, this is one nice thing about Joe's deck is because he has all these flash threats, it's a lot easier for him to put pressure on his opponent if his opponent isn't doing anything. A lot of the times when you see an aggro or mid-range deck fight against a control deck, they kind of have free reign to do whatever they want in terms of taking their time, not getting killed, and just waiting until they draw something good, where Joe's really going to put him to the test. The Snapcaster Mage, even though it's only got 2 power, it has potential to do quite a bit of damage, and that's pretty relevant in this game, to be frank.
So Joe's going to crash in for 2, knocking Robert down to 12. Going to play a Sensei's Divining Top. Let's see if he's going to spin the top, maybe play the land that he has in his hand. He's going to play his land and spin his top.
And I haven't seen a sweeper yet, but I've seen a lot of Joe's 1-for-1 removal. So his plan may be with these flash threats is to really get them to stick on the board, kill his opponent, while just 1-for-1ing everything that his opponent plays that can get in the way.
All right, Robert's just going to play Verdant Catacombs and pass. Joe is going to rearrange the top 3 cards on his end step. He's going to draw for the turn. He will attack with that Snapcaster Mage.
Another thing that's interesting is, generally speaking, the Miracles players always know that the shardless decks are going to have a bunch of abrupt decays for their counterbalances, and sometimes there can be a cat and mouse game where you may actually board all of your counterbalances out against the Miracles opponent to essentially try to render their abrupt decays dead draws.
So Robert's just going to play Pluto Delta and passes that. Ancestral Visions is on 2 counters. But I think I spied a copy of Venser Shaper Savant in those top 3 that Joe now has in his hand. So he has a way to interact with that Ancestral Visions. But Robert does have Force of Will now.
Not going to be able to cast it, though.
Right here we have a
Shardless
Agent
it when it comes off.
Cascade into an Abrupt Decay, targeting that Snapcaster Mage.
Cannot spell snare this. But I would be interested to see if Joe has any targets for Abrupt Decay other than his 3 Snapcaster Mages. Again, I always like to ask a question when I watch these matches, and my big question here is, how did Joe sideboard? That's the thing I really want to know.
All right, well, Snapcaster Mage is going to decay abruptly after Joe looks at the top 3. I think at this point he just has to try and wait and hope to stop that Ancestral Visions. But this one single copy of Force of Will in Robert's hand is going to end up being very, very good. Visions targeting myself. We're going to try and return it to your hand. Robert's going to fetch in response.
And this Ancestral Visions is no laughing matter.
No.
This is going to be a huge deal.
Robert's going to hardcast a Force of Will targeting that Venser Shaper Savant. That will resolve. Is Robert going to get to draw 3 cards here?
This could be the deciding moment in this game. We'll have to see. Drawing 3 cards here is going to put Robert way ahead on card advantage. He already has a board presence. Joe's pretty close to exhausted of resources. And Robert is now on the offensive with a handful of gas.
Right, well, Robert's going to attack for 2 with that Shardless Agent. Going to play Swamp and cast a Deathrite Shaman for the turn. Joe's going to look at the top 3. I believe there is a Terminus in those top 3, so he's going to be able to sweep up Robert's field here if he so desires. Yeah, it looks like he also brought in copies of Wear and Tear, which is interesting. Like, it's a way for him to interact with Norod or Pithy Needle if they happen to have it.
Yeah, or Sylvan Library.
Sylvan Library. Shardless Agent is also an artifact.
Yep,
So
that's a good point.
You can wear it if you need to. Terminus is going to resolve there on Joe's draw step. But Robert has a full hand of cards. Joe will Sensei Divining Top, pass the turn back. So Robert's going to play a copy of Baleful Strix. See if this resolves. It can attack even if there's a mode on the battlefield.
Yep.
17 turns.
Also an artifact, interestingly enough.
So Robert knew that Joe had a copy of Spell Snare in his hand and baited it with that Baleful Strix.
Yeah,
and is
very
now
good
able
play.
to land the Sylvan Library. Unfortunately, Joe does have that Wear Tear, so he's going to have the trump for the trump in the match here, which is pretty nice. Going to miracle the Tear portion of Wear Tear off the top of his deck. Ooh, Robert's going to Brainstorm in response.
Not sure what he could actually find in response. I don't believe there's really anything that he's actually digging to, but by doing so, he has to make Joe feel a little worried in terms of what he could be drawing to.
All right, the Tear version of Wear Tear is going to resolve. Joe's going to look at the top 3. Pass the turn back to Robert. Robert's going to draw a card. There's a Baleful Strix.
And while Baleful Strix isn't particularly powerful in this matchup, it is a nice little 2-for-1 potentially.
Robert's going to fall to 6 and use his fetch land with the draw trigger on the stack.
Who knew that the best Elvish Visionary would be a black-blue creature?
With Death Touch and Flying.
Yeah.
All right, there's a Tar Pit and another copy of Baleful Strix.
So Robert has 2 of those in his main and 1 in the sideboard, so that means that he brought 1 in from the sideboard, which is pretty interesting. Just wanting to, it looks like he just wants to try to grind Joe out, exhaustive of resources.
Oh, is that an Entreat the Angels? It is. Man, that card is just so good.
Thought I saw a little smile on Joe's face when he saw that. He's like, I know how to win this game.
All right, let's see what Robert decides to do here. He's going to fire up the Creeping Tar Pit, send in his team for 5. If he doesn't have an answer for this Entreat, he's just dead on Joe's turn. The Great Equalizer.
Yeah, Entreat is such a card.
There's Chase.
Oh, wow. Now Robert is tapped out, so it looks like Joe's going to be able to
It's a
clean
miracle.
this up in a minute.
It's a miracle.
It is a miracle.
I'm going to respond.
Well, I don't think he's going to respond.
Yeah, he's responding to the brainstorm.
Okay.
He's going to make 3 angels.
And this is one of the things that's so interesting about Magic. Robert Wright has so much stuff. He's ahead on card advantage, but with this 1 Entreat the Angel, Joe has been able to find a situation where he's essentially, just trumping everything that Robert's doing, even though Joe is doing it with less resources. That's one of the things that makes Entreat the Angel such a great card, is it can just be completely, dominate a game, even though it's just 1 card.
Joe Lossett is going to take this match 2-0 over Robert Wright. He's going to extend his win streak to 16 games and move on to 10-0, putting himself in a very good position to get his 21st Open top 8.